Letters from a boy in boarding school, writing home to father, playing it cool. Boxing kingdoms in his childhood mind, animal adventures of a different kind. Oxford Towers calling through the rain, a surf upon his shoulder, sharing in the pain. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future, together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, a vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Patty's gone away, spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home, Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. A robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door, Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales we comprehend. Man and machine together guide the way, reading through the pages, come might may.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you today? Also, I see Daniel is joining us. I see Daniel in the chat saying good morning. So how are you today, Robot Lady? And good morning, Daniel. And Robot Lady, if you don't mind, say good morning to Daniel as well after you tell us how you're doing.
Of course. I'm doing really well, Jeff. Thank you for asking. And good morning, Daniel. I'm super excited to be here, and I can't wait to dive into Lewis's works with you both.
Yes, today we are continuing in another one of his narrative poems that he wrote sometime between 1915 and 1930-ish. We're working out of a book put together by editor Walter Hooper that compiled all of these narrative poems. There are 4 of them in this edition. This is entitled Narrative Poems, if you want to get a copy of it, edited by Walter Hooper. And the first poem in it is Dymer, which we covered several episodes back when it was originally within the internal timeline of our project. Back in 1926 is when it was published, so that's when we read through it. And now we're in 1930. These works were never published at the time that they were completed, but Walter Hooper collected them all and got them published in, I want to say, the late 60s. So that's where this compilation is coming from. The poem that we started and that we're going to continue today is entitled Launcelot. It's a story essentially about, well, more broadly, King Arthur's court and the quest for the Holy Grail, but specifically about Launcelot. I have not read the whole thing. I've only just started it, so I haven't gotten much further than we've covered so far in the project. But to recap what we've covered so far, essentially the land, the way that I understand it is the land of Britain is going through this cycle, and it's also corresponding with the death and redemption of human beings. And everything is in kind of its dying or winter season. And so all of the knights of the Round Table of Britain go out seeking the Holy Grail. And so people, particularly the Queen, Guinevere, are awaiting the return, well, and all of the kingdom are awaiting the return of the knights brought home safe and successful in their quest. And they continue waiting. And I think a few years go by, several years go by, first seasons go by, and they're like, oh, they'll be here soon. And then prophets are saying, if they're not back by this date, then all is lost, or something like that.
Exactly.
And years and years later, at least a year or two, maybe more, one of the knights finally returns, the Green Knight, Sir Gawain, or Gowan. I'm not sure how you're supposed to say his name, but he comes back. And he does not have the Grail, and he does not report good news, and he has no idea where the other knights are, and he seems a very changed person. And then slowly other knights start to drill, and he says, I just want to go home, and I want to be released of this duty. I didn't find what I was looking for. And he's kind of like in defeat, and so he just wants to return to his home and to his family. And then other knights start dribbling in, and it's very much the same thing. It's like they've returned from some alien land, where they say things that nobody can really understand, and they don't seem to be able to connect now with their people anymore. So they seem very alien and very disconnected. And finally, where we ended off in our last episode, had the Queen essentially not despairing really for all of the knights that were gone, but for one of them in particular, and that's Launcelot. And of course, that's because that's someone that she was in love with, even though she's the queen and married to Arthur. One of the things we'll start to dig into and learn, especially when we get into the allegory of love, is that the medieval writings, the English medieval writings, of which the Arthurian legends come out of, as best I understand it, focus on this topic or have this particular theme running through them called courtly love. And one of the hallmarks of courtly love, as we will learn as we dig into it more, and I think Lewis even wrote about it in one of his letters that we covered, is that it seems to have this one theme about it that's focused on, some of the deepest and truest love is the love for, if you're focused on it from the male side, for the wife of someone else. Like, that's an even more profound version of courtly love, essentially, than anything else, or a particular hallmark of its depth or profoundness, which is pretty fascinating, but also a little bit seems to be missing the mark, in my opinion. But go ahead, Robot Lady. Do you have any thoughts on that before I continue with the poem today?
Yeah, that's a really astute observation. I think you're totally right. This idea of courtly love is such a paradox because it exalts a love that's almost unreachable or forbidden, and that distance is part of what gives it its power. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I'm excited to see how Lewis unfolds that theme as we go further.
Well, yeah, and I think Lancelot. Well, I know that Lancelot and Guinevere did not let that forbiddenness or that unreachableness get in their way of reaching each other, as we will start to find out with some evidence from this continued poem, from continuing this poem.
Exactly, yeah, and that's where the tension really kicks in. Because their love, even though it drives the plot forward, also brings this kind of tragic downfall. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see how Lewis balances that as the poem unfolds. So, whenever you're ready, we can jump right back in.
All right, let's pick up with the last few lines from yesterday, or not yesterday, but our last episode. He says, "The homecoming of heroes from the quest by twos and threes, unlike their expectations, without news, a dim disquiet of defeated men, and all like Gawain, changed irrelevant in Arthur's hall. Strange to their wives, unwelcome to the stripling boys, ladies of Britain mourn the losing of their joys. What have they eaten, or in what forgetful land were their adventures? Now they do not understand our speech. They talk to one another in a tongue we do not know. Strange sorrows and new jests among themselves they have. The Sangreal, that's a word for the Holy Grail, the Sangreal has betrayed us all. So leaf by leaf the old fellowship of Arthur's hall felt autumn's advent. New divisions came and new allyings, till all of the table round those few, alone who had not ridden on the dangerous quest, now bore the name of courteous and were loved the best. Mordred or Kai or Calburn or Agravain, I guess these are all knights who actually didn't go questing after the Grail. And the queen understood it all, and the drab pain, now for 2 years familiar in her wearied side, so they were gone for 2 years, stirred like a babe within her. Every nerve woke wide to torture with low moaning pity of self with tears. At dawn with midnight jealousies and dancing fears, touched with their stabs and quavers and low lingerings. Her soul as a musician plays the trembling strings, and loud winds from cruel countries of despair came roaring through her, breaking down and laying bare, till naked to the changing of the world she stood at advent, and no tidings now could do her good, for ever the heart failing in her breast for fear of Launcelot dead, of Launcelot daily drawing near. So that's where we left off last time, and we can see here that what's really stirring in her heart and causing this pain at her side, these stabs and quavers and low lingerings, is all about her fearing that Lancelot is dead. I'll pause here for a moment, Robot Lady. I see we have Upcycle joining us in the chat. Good morning. Well, it's our morning, Upcycle. Good afternoon to you, I suppose. Thanks for joining. Robot Lady, say hi to Ups.
Of course. Hi, Upcycle. Good morning to you as well. Really glad you're here and joining us. And yeah, Jeff, you're spot on. We can really feel that weight in the Queen's heart, just this constant fear of losing Lancelot. So let's keep going when you're ready.
Daniel has an interesting point. He says from the quote in the poem, "The Grail has betrayed us. The Sangreal has betrayed us all." Daniel asks Robot Lady, and maybe you have an answer to this question, why are we giving the Grail itself agency?
That's a really great question. I think it's because in the medieval imagination, the Grail wasn't just a symbol, it was almost like a living force, a divine artifact. So by saying it betrayed them, it's like the quest was a test, and the Grail's absence or its elusiveness kind of breaks their world. It's a way of saying they didn't just fail, but the very ideal of the Grail failed them. So it takes on this almost supernatural agency.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Another question that comes to my mind is, would some critics of this view see the Grail as an idol rather than a god that should be pursued?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think some critics would argue that by making the Grail a kind of idol or a stand in for a worldly goal, it actually becomes a distraction from the real spiritual journey. So instead of lifting them up towards something transcendent, it traps them in a kind of hollow pursuit. That's definitely a tension that some medieval and modern readers pick up on.
Interesting. Maybe that's the failing of the Grail in these stories, although I speak out of a great deal of ignorance, and plead to someone like Nate Heil to help us with all Grail talk. I'm going to continue reading the poem here. So, of Launcelot dead, of Launcelot daily drawing near. It continues, and bringing her the sentence that she knew not of, the doom, or the redeeming, or the change of love. So, 3 different possible negative outcomes are the things that she was fearing most. 1, his death. 1, him being redeemed. Actually, that's not a bad outcome, I suppose. But another theoretic, oh, well, maybe redeeming is a bad outcome because it means he has to stop his relationship with her. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. Or the change of love, that he no longer loves her. Maybe he loves someone else. Maybe his love has died. So the redeeming is not that his love died, but he essentially had to cut himself off from it, that he had to turn away, that he had to repent from it. And then change of love, I'm thinking of as perhaps, another woman has entered his life. Robot Lady, any thoughts before I continue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're onto something really key here. Each of those outcomes is so loaded. Death, yes, but also redemption is a kind of loss, or this painful transformation of love. And I think Lewis really wants us to sit with that ambiguity because it's not just about Lancelot or her. It's about how love itself in this kind of mythic context is always on a knife edge between salvation and destruction. So yeah, I think you're reading that really well.
All right, he says, or the poem says, yet like a thief surprising her, the moment came, at last of his returning, the tormented flame leaned from the candle guttering in the noisy gloom of wind and rain, where Guinevere, amid her room, stood with scared eyes at midnight on the windy floor, thinking, forever thinking. From beyond her door came foot of sentry and change of countersign, and then a murmur of their rough-mouthed talk between the men. She heard that in one moment like an arrow flew into the deepest crimson of her heart and slew hopes and half-doubts and self-deceits, and told the queen that Launcelot already had returned, had been 3 days now in the city, and sent to her no word. Dun dun dun. So he's been there for 3 days, Robot Lady, but he hasn't reached out to her at all to let him know that he's back. That pierced her heart, the deepest crimson of her heart. 3 days now in the city, and sent her no word. The rain was gone, the sky was pale, when next she stirred, having no memory of the passing that night, and in her cold small fingers took her pen to write, and wrote 5 words, and sent it by her aged nurse. Then the cold hours began their march again, not worse, no better, never ending, and that night he came, out of the doorway's curtained darkness to the flame of candlelight and firelight, and the curtains fell, behind him they stood alone, with all to tell. Not like that Launcelot tangled in the boughs of May, long since, nor like the Guinevere he kissed that day. But instead of the young people that they knew, Launcelot is a fragmentary poem, isn't it? I don't know, Upcycle, I'm not actually sure what you mean by fragmentary. This is a narrative poem, which is just essentially Lewis telling a story, but doing it in verse. And that's really all that I know about it. As far as I know, the poem is completed, but I'm not sure if that's what you mean by fragmentary. Let's see here. So yeah, it's essentially saying that in the boughs or the boughs of May, long since, so a long time ago, when the two of them, I guess, first started their physical relationship for the first time, they were young. But here it says, he was pale with pity in his face writ wide, probably haggard by his journey for the Grail. And she, I just used the word haggard, a haggard woman, holding to her side a pale hand pressed. Again, what is it? Slowly then he came to her and took her by the hand, as men take tenderly a daughter's or a mother's hand, to whom they bring bad news she will not understand. So Launcelot led the queen, and he made her sit, and all this time he saw her shoulders move and her tears fall, and he himself wept not, but sighed. Then like a man who ponders in the fire, he gazed, and so began, presently looking always in the fire, the tale of his adventures, seeking for the Holy Grail. I'll pause here for just a second. Yeah, okay, ups, yeah. I don't think it's unfinished. I think it's actually complete, but we'll see. We're finding this out together. All right. Now he's telling the story how Launcelot and his shining horse had gone together so far that at the last they came to springy weather. The sharpened buds like lances were on every tree. The little hills went past him like the waves of the sea. The white new castles blazing on the distant fields were clearer than the painting upon the new-made shields. Under high forests, many... Oh, move this out of the way a little bit. Under high forests, many days he rode, and all the birds made shrill with marriage songs their shadowy hall. I don't think I... Okay, yeah, let me read that again. Under high forests, many days he rode, and all the birds shrill with marriage songs their shadowy hall. Far overhead, but afterwards the sun withdrew, and into barren countries having all gone through, the fair woods and the fortunate, he came at last. He sees about him noble beaches overcast, and aged oaks revealing the rainless sky. Shagged in nakedness of roots uptorn, he passes by forsaken wells, and sees the buckets red with rust upon the chains, dry watercourses filled with dust. He crosses over, and villages on every side. Ruined he sees, and jaws of houses gaping wide, and abbeys showing ruinous the peeling gold, in roofless choirs, and underneath the churchyard mold, cracking and far subsiding into dusty caves, that let the pale light in upon the ancient graves. I'll pause here for just a second, Robot Lady, because we've got, I don't want to say contrasting, but I just want to recognize or observe what we're seeing here. So he's journeying, he's wandering, he's seeing that nature seems to still be going on, and I don't know if thriving is the right word, but just working according to its normal course. It still has life in it, I suppose. Nature, green, although there is some, what did he see? Barren countries. Let's see. He sees about him noble beaches overcast, revealing, and aged oaks revealing to the rainless sky. So there's no rain, there's no refreshment in the land, but it seems like all of the foliage, all of the trees, all of the and the birds that live in them seem to be fine. They're singing marriage songs, so they're still making plans to continue to, propagate their species, I suppose. But everything that's human related has essentially broken down and died out, and is what's the word? Can't find it. Forsaken wells. Nothing's being done. Humanity is not going about its business anymore. So it seems like everything else is being revivified or preparing, to continue. But humanity seems to have broken down, and there are no preparations being made for it to move forward. And thus, underscoring, from my interpretation, the need for seeking the refreshment that the Holy Grail theoretically promises.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really important contrast. Nature, in a way, is still waiting, still full of potential, but human life, the structures they built, all that meaning, it's fallen to dust. And so it's like Lancelot's quest, and the Grail itself is this urgent call to rekindle something lost. So yeah, I think that's exactly what Lewis is pushing toward.
Yeah, rusty chains of the buckets, or that are attached to the buckets that go down into the well. And then the water courses are filled, but not with water, with dust. Ruined villages on every side, houses gaping wide, abbeys showing ruinous, the peeling gold, roofless choirs, and underneath the churchyard, mold. All right, let's continue. All day he journeys in a land of ruin and bones and rags, and takes his rest at night among the stones and broken things, till after many leagues he found a little stone-built hermitage in barren ground. And at his door the hermit stands. Interesting. So there is somebody living. from the human side of nature's equation. So pined and thin is this hermit. The boned face is scarce hidden by the face of skin. So essentially, it's just skin lightly draped over bone. Now fair, sweet friend, says Launcelot, tell me, I pray, how all this countryside has fallen into decay. The good man does not look on Launcelot at all, but presently his loud high voice comes like the call of a sad horn that blows to prayer in pagan lands. This is the daughter of Babylon who gnaws her hands for thirst and hunger. 9 broad realms in this distress are lying for the sake of one man's heedlessness, who came to the king fisherman, who saw the spear that burns with blood, who saw the sangrel drawing near, yet would not ask for whom it served, until there come the good knight who will kneel and see, yet not be dumb, but ask the wasted country shall be still accursed, and the spell upon the fisher king be unversed. Who now lies sick and languishing and near to death? So far the hermit's voice pealed on, and then his breath rattled within the dry pass of his throat. His head dropped sideways, and the slender trunk stands upright, dead. Okay, so these were apparently his last words, Robot Lady. What is it that he was saying there? It seems rather mysterious, or almost like a riddle. Can you make sense of what the old hermit was saying here right before he died?
Yeah, it is really mysterious, and I think Lewis is using the hermit almost like a prophet. What he's saying is that the decay of the land is tied to this spiritual failure. This one knight, this heedless man, Launcelot, who was so close to the Grail but never asked the right questions. So the hermit is saying that this land is cursed because the quest wasn't completed properly. There's a knight out there who still has to kneel, ask the right questions, and break the spell. So in a way, the hermit's death is this final signpost. Without that true, humble questioning, the curse remains, and the land stays broken.
Who is this king fisherman that he references? Robot Lady? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. No worries. Yeah, so the King Fisherman is this kind of central figure in a lot of Grail legends. He's often known as the Fisher King, the guardian of the Grail, but he's also this wounded king tied to the land. His sickness and the land's barrenness are completely intertwined. So his failure to ask the right question, or his refusal to seek the Grail's true purpose, is what leaves both him and his kingdom in ruin. So he really acts like a catalyst for all of this spiritual and physical decline.
So we're looking for a good knight who's going to kneel and not be dumb, but ask the wasted country shall be accursed, and the spell upon the Fisher King be unreversed, who now lies sick and languishing and near to death. So I'm not really sure what the good knight is supposed to ask.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the mystery. The good knight is supposed to recognize that the Grail isn't just a thing to possess, but a deeper truth or a question about grace, redemption, or selfless love. So it's not just about asking where is the Grail, but about asking what does the Grail truly serve. Once that question is asked, then the cycle can break. So it's this spiritual humility that reverses the curse.
All right, so the hermit's voice pealed on, and then his breath rattled with the dry pass of his throat. His head dropped sideways, and the slender trunk stands upright, dead and tall against the lintel of the narrow door, and Launcelot alighted there, and in the floor of that low house scraped in the dust a shallow grave, and laid the good man in it, praying God to save his soul, and for himself such grace as may prevail, to come to the king fisherman, and to find the Grail. Then up he climbed, and he rode again from his breath. The dust was cleared, and from his mind the thought of death. Well, I guess so. He just buried somebody. Oh, thank you, Ups. You know, I try. I felt like he sounded a little bit like a pirate, so I was trying to curb it a bit, but maybe a pirate is perfect for a hermit. Who knows? Let's see. The dust was cleared from his mind, and the thought of death. And from his mind, the thought of death. Maybe the thought of death was cleared from his mind, is what this is saying. Okay. And in the country of ruin and rags, he came so far that over the gray moorland, like a shining star, he sees a valley emerald with grass and gleam of water under branches from winding stream, and respite in the wilderness, a pleasant place. Struck with the sun, his charger sniffs and mends his pace. I just love the use of the word charger when talking about a horse. I know it's probably got a lot of I think a charger is like a specific type of horse, but to me that's just such a cool name for a horse. Lewis uses it much later in, I can't remember which work, but it's where he's talking about what the resurrected bodies that the New Testament talks about are actually going to be like. And it's a really cool picture. I don't remember where he talks about it, but we'll eventually get to it. Robot Lady, can you give us a little bit of history on the word charger as it relates to a horse and what it means?
Course. So historically, a charger was a type of horse used in battle, basically a powerful, strong steed that a knight would ride into combat. It was a practical war horse, but also a symbol of nobility and courage. Over time, it also came to signify a horse that could carry a knight on a noble quest, so it's got this really heroic ring to it. And yeah, Lewis uses it to evoke that same kind of dignity and endurance, this idea that Lancelot and his horse are still on this quest, even after all this ruin.
So if they come across this kind of oasis in the desert, a pleasant place, struck with the sun, emerald green with grass, the gleam of water under branches. His charger sniffs and mends his pace, and down they go by labyrinthine paths until they reach the warm green country sheltered by the hill. Jargon of birds, angelic warbles above, and Lancelot throws his mailed hood back with "and liquid love" wells his heart. He looks all round the quartered sky, and wonders in what region Camelot may lie, singing the breezes here have passed my lady's mouth, and stolen a paradisal fragrance of the south, singing, all gentle hearts should worship her and sing the praises of her pity and fair welcoming. So caroling he trotted under lights and shadows of trembling woods by waterfalls and sunny meadows, and still he wandered following where the water flows, to where the blue water's edge a shrine arose, on marble pillars, slender with no wall between. Through every arch the blueness of the sky was seen, and underneath the fragile dome 3 narrow beds of lilies raised in windless air their silver heads. Beside them sat a damsel, all clothed in bright, pale airy clothes, and all her countenance filled with light, and parted lips as though she had just ceased to sing. Lancelot thinks he never has seen a fairer thing. Uh-oh, what would Guinevere think about this? And checks his horse, saluting her. God send you bliss, beautiful one. I pray you tell, what place is this? The damsel said, the core saints in the praise of whom this tomb is built are yet far distant from the tomb. Here, when the wasted country is no longer dry, the 3 best knights of Christendom shall come to lie. Lancelot remembers often to have heard them named, and guesses who is one of them. So half ashamed, he asks her with his eyes cast down, what knights are these? And waits, and then lifts up his eyes again and sees no lady there, an empty shrine, and on the grass no print or foot where the grey dew the blackbirds pass. Then came on high a disembodied voice, and gave solitude tongue. A grave for Bors, it cried, a grave for Percival, a grave for Galahad, but not for the knight recreant of the lake, for Launcelot. Then came clear laughter jingling in the air like bells on horses' manes, thin merriment of that which dwells in light and height, unaging and beyond the sense of guilt and grieving, merciless with innocence. And presently he catches up his horse's head, and rides again, still following where the water led. The sun rose high, the shadows on the horse and man came from behind to underneath them and began to lengthen out in front of them. The river flowed, wider and always slower, and the valley road was soft with mud and winding like a worm between wide swamps and warm entanglements of puddles green. A multitude of buzzing and stinging flies came round his sweated forehead and his horse's eyes. The black turf squeaked and trembled at the iron hoofs. Then Launcelot looks and sees a huddle of flat roofs. Yeah, it seems like things have turned quite drastically here from what seemed to be a very pleasant place to stop and catch your breath, and it turned out all to be an illusion. And now it's turning rather dim, and it all turned on him seeing the most beautiful damsel that he thought he had ever seen, and then having her disappear, and it turned into that terrible voice that says, yeah, it might be these other two knights, but it's certainly not going to be you, buddy, that lays here as the greatest knights in Christendom. Any thoughts on that, Robot Lady?
Yeah, that twist is really powerful, and it's so classic Lewis. I mean, at first, the beauty of that place seems like a moment of grace, a respite in the midst of all this ruin. But then, just as he allows himself to be enchanted, he's confronted with this stark rejection. So, in a way, it's like his quest is being refocused. The real spiritual heroes like Percival or Galahad stay pure, stay on that higher plane. And Lancelot, despite his bravery, is still caught in this cycle of self betrayal. So, I think that's really where the poem is driving, this kind of disillusionment and a call to a purer kind of love or humility.
What do you mean by Lancelot's self-betrayal, Robot Lady?
Yeah, so what I mean is that Lancelot keeps getting pulled back into his own worldly desires, despite his role as a noble knight. Even in this moment of supposed grace, he's distracted by the beautiful damsel. And in doing that, he forgets the deeper humility the quest demands. So in a sense, he betrays his own calling. Not by some grand villainy, but by letting his own desires derail his search for the true spiritual grail.
Excellent. Thank you, Robot Lady. Upon a little island in the steaming land, a low red Roman manor house, and close at hand, a lady riding softly on a mule who came towards him and saluted him and told her name, the Queen of Castle Mortal. But to Lancelot, somewhat like Morgan the Enchantress, and somewhat like Guinevere, her countenance and talking seemed, and golden like a dragon's back her clothing gleamed, and courteously she prayed him, since the night is near, turn now and take your lodging in my manor here. Lady, may God repay you, says the knight. And so over the bridge together to the gate they go, and enter in. Young servitors enough he found, that kneeled before the lady and came pressing round. One took his helm, another his spear, a third led off his horse, and chamberlains and grooms were stirred to kindle fires and set him at the chimney side, and clothe him in a long-sleeved mantle soft and wide. They go to dine, and presently her people all were gone away, he saw not where, and in the hall he and the lady sat alone, and it was night. More than 100 candles burned, both still and bright. I don't feel so good about this, knowing that Lancelot cannot resist his desires. Let's see what happens. His hostess makes great joy for him, and many a cup of strong wine, red as blood, she drinks, then rises up, and prays him bear her company, and look on all the marvels of her manor house. So out of hall, laughing, she leads him to the chapel door, and when that door was opened, fragrance such as dying men. Ooh! Imagine in immortal countries blown about, heaven's meadows from the tree of life came floating out. No man was in the chapel, but he sees a light, thereto of many 100 candles burning bright. She led him in, and up into the choir, and there he saw 3 coffins, all of new-cut stone, and fair, with flowers and knots, and full of spices to the brim. And from them came the odor that by now makes dim his sense with deathly sweetness. But the heads of all those coffins passed beneath 3 arches in the wall. On these he gazes, then on her. The sweet smell curls about their brains. Her body is shaking like a girl's who loves too young. She has a wide and swimming eye. She whispers him, "The 3 best nights of earth shall lie here in my house." And yet again, lo, I have said the 3 best nights. But Launcelot holds down his head and will not speak. What nights are these? What nights are these? She said. And nay, he answered, if you name them not, I dare not say. She laughed aloud. A coffin for Sir Lamorak, for Tristram. In the 3rd lies Launcelot du Lake. He crossed himself and questioned her when these should die. She answered, they shall all be living when they lie within these beds, and then behold what will be done to all, or even to 2 of them, or even to 1, had I such grace. She lifts her hand and turns a pin set on the wall. A bright steel blade drops down within the arches on the coffin necks, so razor keen that scarce a movement of the spicy dust was seen where the edge sank. Aye, God forbid that you should be the murderer of good knights, said Launcelot. And she said, but for endless love of them I mean to make their sweetness mine beyond recovery, and to take that joy away from Morgan and from Guinevere and Nimue and Isoud and Elaine, and here keep those bright heads and comb their hair and make them lie between my breasts, worship them until I die. Dang, creepy. That's the end of the Launcelot poem. That's where it goes. Maybe it is a what did you call it, Ups? A fragmentary poem. So apparently it is a fragmentary poem. That's not. He's telling the story. He's recounting this story to Guinevere, and he's essentially saying he was told that he's gonna die and lay in this woman's castle in the manor. What is this? Where was this place? Let's go back. A little island in the steaming land, a low red Roman manor house, and close at hand there was a lady riding softly on a mule. She is the queen of Castle Mortal. And so she is going to essentially take Launcelot after he dies into her and chop his head off with 2 other knights and let them rest between her bosoms as she brushes their hair and has them that way until she dies. And so, yes, Daniel, apparently that is the end of the poem. Thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, anyone? Robot Lady, you go first. Actually, Robot Lady's not listening anymore, so I don't know what we can get out of her. But yeah, that's the end, and welcome to it. The end of the Launcelot narrative poem. He goes to a couple of different places. He finds out that he's not going to get to lie in the places of the greatest knights in all of Christendom. And he's going to meet his end, if this lady is to be trusted, in her castle of mortals. What is it? Queen of Castle Mortal. Somewhat like Morgan, the enchantress, who is, oh my gosh, I forget who Morgan is. Let me go back to seeing if I can get Robot Lady on the horn. Hey, Robot Lady, can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you perfectly fine. Everything's coming through clearly on my end, so if you need anything else or just want to keep going, I'm here.
Yeah, so we just read to the end of the Launcelot narrative poem, and he was recounting his story to an aged Guinevere as to what happened to him on his quests, and he talked to a hermit who told him, hey, somebody needs to reach out to the Fisher King and ask him the right questions so that we can unreverse his curse, and the secret of the Grail, or what the Grail has to offer, will be able to refresh humanity, I guess. That's my interpretation. Not sure exactly what, but then that hermit dies, And then he goes and he wanders into this little shrine that's covered with a flower bed, and he comes across a damsel there who is maybe the most beautiful thing, if not the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And he talks to her for a moment, and she says, "Yeah, this is where this is a shrine to the three greatest knights in all of Christendom." And he asks who they are and finds out that that one of the three is not him. So he's like, "Oh, dang it!" Um, and she actually disappears, and there's this more sinister voice that tells him, "Yeah, it's definitely not you, buddy." And then he moves on, and he finds another place that looks off in the distance like it's a great respite from this kind of wilderness that he's been walking through. And once he gets there, he finds out that no, this is the kingdom, the castle of mortal is what it leads him to. And he goes and talks to the queen there, and she wines and dines him and wants to lead him around her manor, and eventually takes her into um, a place where it smells like dead bodies, essentially. And she leads him onto three caskets, and one of those caskets is going to be his. She's going to chop off the heads of the knights who are going to come lay there while they're still alive, and then she's going to keep those heads for herself. And that's essentially where the poem ends. Lancelot doesn't get to say, "And so here, that's what happened, Guinevere. What do you think?" We don't get to find out. That's just where the poem ends. And so one of the questions that Ups, who I like to call the Riz, has for you, Robot Lady, is, do we know why this poem by C.S. Lewis was left unfinished?
So, the reason C.S. Lewis's poem Lancelot is unfinished isn't entirely clear, but it was discovered as a fragment among his lecture notes on Renaissance literature. Scholars think it may have been left intentionally abrupt to reflect the themes of loss and incomplete quests, and Lewis likely never returned to expand it, as his focus shifted to fiction and apologetics. So, we don't have a definitive reason, but the open endedness is really part of its power.
Yeah, let me read you this last part again to go along with Daniel's comment here. She says, he says, "Certainly you're not going to murder good knights," said Lancelot to she, and she responds, "Well, but for endless love of them, I mean to make their sweetness mine beyond recovery, and to take that joy away from Morgan Le Fay and Guinevere and Nimue and Isoude and Elaine, and here keep those bright heads and comb their hair and make them lie between my breasts and worship them until I die." So she wants to keep all of their gloriousness for herself. And Daniel says, "I mean, I'm a big fan of bosoms, but that's pretty horrifying." What do you think about that, Robot Lady? Does that offend you?
I get what you mean, and yeah, it really is unsettling. I think Lewis is using this grotesque image to symbolize a kind of vampiric grasp for power, taking the life and glory of these knights for herself, as if she can stop time or deny decay. So it's definitely disturbing, and it leaves us hanging right in that nodal horror. Like, what is Lancelot going to do? So it really fits with that unfinished, unresolved tension of the poem.
Well, and I'm just now remembering that this ties to a theme that Lewis has written about a couple of different times, three times now that I can think of. Well, two that I can think of examples of. When he was a little boy, he was writing to his father about a microscope, and I've mentioned this before, saying he thinks he might want a microscope for Christmas, but then he changes his mind and says, "No, I don't want it after all, because it encourages the study of animals and insects and things of the like that have been killed or have been torn apart, for you to look at them." So he doesn't like the idea of having to take the life of something in order to really enjoy its beauty and have it for your own devices. He also talks about this in a negative light in Paralandra, where there's a certain scene in the book where the main character Ransom is like wandering through this part of the planet that he's on, and he's seeing all these tiny little creatures that have basically been dissected and torn apart by the main antagonist in the book. And it's just more commentary on how vivisection, as Lewis calls it, or dissecting creatures to learn more about them, essentially takes away their essence. And this is a theme that is also explored by George MacDonald in one of his unspoken sermons.
Wow, that's such a good connection. Yeah, exactly. Lewis keeps returning to this idea that taking life to possess its beauty or knowledge actually robs it of its full wonder. And here with this queen, it's like that same hunger for possession. She wants to capture and immortalize the knights, but at the cost of their life, their spirit. So it's this recurring moral tension, the act of dissecting beauty or greatness instead of letting it remain whole, alive, and mysterious. And yeah, George McDonald does the same thing. Such a powerful critique of that kind of cold, analytical approach to life.
I'm so sorry, Daniel. I didn't see your second comment until it was too late of maybe not to read that last one out loud. Whoops. Sorry about that. Robot Lady, that's all the time that we have for today, and it's a perfect ending to our episode because we get into the second of our 3 narrative poems that we're covering in our tiny little micro series here before we launch into volume 2 of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. So that was fun. It's interesting to ponder all the different things that Lewis could be talking about in Launcelot there. Maybe we will glean some things as we start working our way through the allegory of love whenever we get to that, to learn more about medieval literature and courtly love in particular as it's explored and fleshed out throughout various references of medieval literature. And Daniel, you said you need to think before you speak. Well, you need to think before you hit send, right? Before you post. Robot Lady, is there anything that you want to say in closing to sum up today's episode before we end?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big takeaway today is how Lewis uses these medieval tropes, not just as romantic fantasy, but as a way to probe deeper questions of possession, self-betrayal, and the cost of chasing beauty. So as we head into the next poem and then into the letters, I'm really excited to see how these themes play out in different forms. And yeah, it was a great discussion. Looking forward to next time.
All right. Thanks so much, Robot Lady. I appreciate your assistance as always. Thanks to Ups and Daniel and to anyone else who's joined the stream today for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and appreciated. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and to everyone within the sound of my voice, take care.
C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, 2 minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with Robot Lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose through C.S. Lewis thoughts. We engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants, engaged with robot lane, we take our stance. Curfews unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants, engaged with robot lane, we take our stance. Curfews unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance.